Good morning and welcome to the Environment, Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee on 20th September 2023. You know who's at the top table. Barbara Renton, Director to my left, and Adam Taylor to my right. Can we use the chat box in the normal way for questions and comments? And I'd now move to, are there any apologies? I don't believe there are, but there's one or two substitutions, and if you can do the roll call of members online. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Convener. We've had apologies this morning from Councillor Kogali, who will be substituted by Councillor Braun, and also apologies from Bailey Williamson, who will be substituted by Councillor Massey. The majority of members are present in the chamber. I'll just ask those online to confirm that they're actually in the meeting. Bailey.
Good morning, present.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Yeah, good morning, Adam. Yep.
And Councillor Robertson.
Present, thank you.
That's all members present, Convener.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect of today's business? I see none, thank you. Moving on to item 3, the minutes of our last meeting. Can I ask if we can approve those minutes, agree those minutes? Agreed, thank you very much. No, sorry, my apologies. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. I've got a question on item 6 on the minute from the previous meeting, which I was unfortunately unable to attend. But the question is really to you, and I noticed that since the last meeting, there's been a substantial change in the opening hours of our recycling centres, and I wondered why, as a committee, we were never consulted on this. My understanding, the changes have been agreed between yourself and officers, but I think as a service committee, surely one of our roles is to look at the way our services are delivered. And so I really wanted to have your thoughts on why, as a committee, we were never consulted on the changes that are coming into force on the 1st of October. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. It was a decision that came out of the budget discussions and decisions, and has, following on the budget decisions on resourcing, those decisions have been implemented, which has led to changes in the opening hours of all of our recycling centres.
Yes, I fully understand why the decision was taken, but I'm just saying, as a service committee, I think it would have been polite, and also as part of our role, surely, as councillors, to be consulted on the hours of opening of our recycling centres in line with our budget, agreed budget going forward. So I think I would like to, in future, try and adopt a more consultative approach to members of this committee.
Thank you for that. So I'm conscious that there was discussion and debate about, consultation about exactly when recycling centres would open, and there was examination of the usage patterns of the recycling centres so that the reduced hours had the least impact possible. But I'll take your point forward. Thank you. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. Seeing as Councillor Robertson has raised the issue, I wondered if there was any explanation as to why there was a 3-hour reduction in the opening times rather than the 2 hours that was agreed at budget. Thank you.
Barbara will take that. Mark will take that. Mark Butterworth.
Yes, thanks for being. I think there's two things. First of all, it was in line with, predominantly in line with achieving the savings that we agreed that we would make. Also, the staff don't actually finish on the closing time. They do work on for a period of time. So fundamentally, it was about ensuring that we met the savings target. I think just in terms of moving forward, I've sent information out to members, and I just wanted to make it absolutely clear that I don't feel that the times and the days are set in stone. I think people will undoubtedly change their behaviour in terms of the usage, and we will need to continue to monitor and review that usage to make sure there aren't any issues. So I actually will commit to bring further information back to members in consultation with the convener how we do that around usage and whether we need to have another look at those times and whether they're working. But you know, the best way to get to understand whether this is the right proposal in terms of the days and the hours is to look at the future and how they're being used. So I don't think they will be set in stone by any means and fixed forever. So I just wanted to commit to doing that piece of work.
Thank you for that. And I'd just like to reiterate the point that was made that I think the present opening times are not set in stone, and as the resourcing situation allows, we have retained all of the recycling centres, and if we can open them for longer periods, that would certainly be desirable. Thank you. Moving.
Sorry, not got my chat up. Can I just make a quick
Councillor Waters,
comment or suggestion, please? Mark, just wondering whether you know, there has been quite a lot of local disquiet about it being closed most evenings, and if there's potential to, when you're doing the review and looking at it, to look at the potential if it would be worthwhile opening it even just for one evening during the week, just to give people who go in the evening the chance to do it. If it would be possible to include that in a review, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can we then agree the minutes of the last meeting? Agreed, thank you. Moving on then to item 4, the outstanding business statement. Can we, are there any questions on the outstanding business statement? And can we remove any items now that are shown as complete? Thank you. Agreed, thank you. Moving on then to item 5, we have the road safety project assessment criteria, and can I ask Mark Butterworth to introduce this report? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, convener, and good morning, members. Members of the committee will be familiar with the road safety project database, which was established in March 2019. The database works very well. It provides a clear and transparent record of demand for future road safety projects, which are prioritised using an evidence base. Members will also be aware of the quarterly road safety ward meetings, which officers and hopefully elected members find very useful in understanding local priorities and discussing progress on delivering those road safety schemes. As part of the budget process, the council agreed funding for an additional officer, which was very much appreciated. However, the road safety team remains very small with a really large workload. So it's essential that we focus only on the highest priorities and avoid any abortive work. Therefore, this report proposes 2 improvements to the way the database works. Firstly, we are proposing that there is an additional engagement with community councils, where they exist, of course, to better inform local priorities. And this would involve sending the list of projects out to each community council prior to the start of the financial year and asking them to prioritise projects within their community council area only. And further details of this are set out at paragraph 4.8. And secondly, in order to better manage the workload of officers and expectations of residents, we're proposing to seek ward member approval prior to any new project being added to the database. There are currently around 950 projects on the list, many of which will never be delivered, and this simply raises expectations in the community and provides officers and members with an almost unachievable task. Therefore, the proposals in this report, we believe will help us better manage expectations and better manage the workload of the team, allowing us to focus only on those projects that deliver the most benefit for residents. Thank you, convener.
Thank you very much. I notice that questions are coming in. First of all, Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, convener, and Mark, thanks for that introduction. I was just wondering how this will work in practice. So just say, for example, in my ward, there's an ongoing project that Daryl's helping us with, and that's about 40 mile an hour speed limits across a wide area, but that includes 2 community council areas. So what would happen if there was a project that we were working on which scored the same, but it covered 2 community council areas? How would we decide which community council had the right to choose?
Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Kabir. Thanks, Councillor Forbes. I think ultimately the decision will still lie with the ward members, and a lot of this will be around discussion and compromise. So, you know, there will be situations where there are competing priorities, but again, you know, as we deal with them, as you know, it's very much around those discussions at ward member level. So where they cross more than one community council, we will have the views of those community councils, but ultimately the decision will sit with the ward members in terms of what we prioritise, because as you know, Councillor Forbes, for everything we do, there needs to be some something which we can't do, if you like, but it's very much simply around trying to get more input and feedback from community councils, but ultimately the decision will still sit with the ward members who, as you know, the remit is right across the area, which covers us generally more than one community council.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, convener. I think I've got 2 questions, but I'll just want to pick up on something very quickly, and then I'll come back later on in the sequence, if that's okay. It was just in relation to Mr. Butterworth's introduction, where you mentioned that there had been budget monies agreed for an extra officer. Was it not 2 officers?
I can't recall. I think it was 1, but I'm not sure. Mark?
Yeah. As far as I'm aware, it was 1, and we've employed recently a technician to take up that post. I will need to double check that, but I wasn't aware it was for 2. We certainly have employed 1 and have the money for that, but I can go away and check that. But it would be great if it was for 2, and I've got that one wrong.
Thanks. If you would just if you could go and double check, that'd be great. Thank you.
Service manager Brian Cargill's confirming it was only budget for 1. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey, Ken.
Thank you very much, convener. Thanks very much, Mark, for that presentation. Very interesting way of looking at some of these things. I want to get into one of the technical details in section 4.8, where you have the table with illustrative community scoring, etc., which looks a very interesting concept. Is there any background as to how you decided to do this? Because obviously, kind of beauty is in the eye of the beholder when it comes to certain things. Is the scoring based upon a system that you've used elsewhere, or what's the basis and background of that? Thanks.
Thank you. The scoring system was established a number of years ago, but I'm sure that Mark will be happy to give some explanation just now. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Thanks for the question. I think I would have to defer to Daryl, who was the expert on these things. So Daryl will be able to give you that detail.
So in answer to the question about the assessment criteria, it was set out in the E&I committee reports 1983, which was when we first brought up the subject of a road safety project's assessment criteria. That was based on an earlier trial on new rural footways in 2017. Details of that are included in the appendix for this report. But we look at the road collisions, road casualties, road environment, the usage of the area, the number of different bodies and services in that area, links to school, and also links to sustainable transport.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And now we go virtual, and Councillor Bob Braun. Bob.
Thank you very much, convener, and thank you, Mark, for the presentation, and also very much appreciated the quarterly reports that we have from you and Daryl and Brian. They are very useful. My question is relating to paragraph 4.4 in the report, and I'll have to flash it up. It was talking about waiting for sites with a collision and casualty history. Now, there are situations where, and I'm thinking of one particularly in my area, where there have been a series of accidents, but there's been no casualties. I mean, there are bumps or coming off the road. There's been no emergency services called out, but they are forming a pattern. And I just wonder, is there some way of working that in, either through elected members or community council, to bring these in line? I have spoken to Daryl about this many months ago at the end of Rattery, where the speed limit goes straight from 30 into 60, and there's a bend in the road or a camber in the road which causes some accidents, but very rarely it's a collision. It's literally just a bad driving or not knowing the road. So is there some way of weighting that in if the community council and elected members bring it forward?
Mark?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I think that is really, really important. Again, my understanding is that it is based on data around the impact on casualties or deaths and not necessarily accidents. And I do know that we have lots of discussions at the ward meetings where members have said, well, you know, there's a car in that field every other week. So that local knowledge is really important. And I think at the moment, that's the importance of the quarterly ward meetings and getting the input of the community councils, because they have that local knowledge. So I do think that's really important. And so it is effectively fed in at the moment, but maybe not necessarily formally in terms of the cost benefit analysis. I don't know if Daryl, you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, within the assessment criteria, there is a provision for damage only incidents. I think, as Councillor Braun has said, one of the difficulties is many of them are unreported, and the local authorities no longer receive road traffic collision reports for damage only incidents from Police Scotland. But if a member of the public or an elected member or fire and rescue or any other body can provide us with information or evidence of damage only incidents, they are scored and they are included in the criteria. The difficulty with the damage only incidents is it's difficult to corroborate the information. We don't know the number of vehicles, we don't know the weather conditions or time of day, but we do they are included in the scoring system.
Thanks, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, Richard.
Thank you, convener. Thanks for the report here. The process of making the decision, and I think Councillor Forbes kind of covered a little bit on this, but just from a Kinrossshire perspective with the Kinross committee within there, you know, we do have our local meetings with road officers which are exceptionally useful, but just confirmation that the actual decision will be made at the Kinross committee, where, you know, one of the really good things about this, the changes that are coming forward, is that the involvement of community council, and obviously that committee has one person from all the community councils within the area, and that's an absolute essential to the changes that are getting proposed, and very welcome. But just confirmation that the decision is getting made within the Kinross committee. Thank you.
I think I can answer that one directly, Richard. There is no intent to give the community council's decision here. It's a consultative role, and the decision will be taken either by the quarterly ward meetings or in the Kinross case by the Kinross committee.
I think your answer. I think the point was it's not the community council making the decision out with. The point is that the ward members are not making the decision at these ward meetings with elected members. It is getting made at the actual Kinross committee. I think that was the confirmation I was looking at, because the paper kind of covers how it works within the rest of the area, which is within the ward members with their meetings. But I think the beauty of the Kinross committee is that it allows the community councillors to be involved in that decision directly, and I think that was what I was looking for the confirmation on.
I think I'll ask Barbara to answer this one. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. There's no intention to change the process as it stands, given the scheme of admin for the Kinross local committee.
Thank you.
Now moving on to Councillor Duff. John.
Thanks, convener. Yes, the Highland ward is one of the wards that have involved community councils in the past, and we have 8 community councils within the ward. But there's a road safety subgroup, I think, as you possibly know, within our action partnership, which provides input to these things. I think we're actually due to have a road safety meeting later on today, funnily enough, but I just want to ask the question, will we be providing the community councils with the whole spreadsheet for the ward, not just their own area? I think it might be important that they see the spread of road safety tasks within the ward. And can we also make sure that we explain to them that this isn't cast in stone either, and that new projects may come in which use up the list over the course of the year, so that they realise that their priority may get overtaken by other events. Thanks.
Thank you. The intent here is quite clear, to give community councils, if you like, a role in tie breaking, where projects relevant to them have been given an equal score by officers. But I'll bring in Mark Butterworth in terms of the overall information that they receive. I certainly wouldn't want at this stage community councils to be moving beyond the role they're being asked to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, it is about consulting the community councils. You know, what we're trying to do here is, as I said in the introduction, is around make sure that we are delivering on the priorities for those areas. In terms of the list itself, at the moment the list is not broken down over community council area, it's broken down over ward area. So we would provide the community councils with the information on all the schemes for their wards. But you know, this is about us, you know, evolving, if you like, and having those discussions. So as you highlighted, there's a different arrangement set up in Highland Ward, there's a different arrangement in Kinross. So it's about you know, not one size fits all. So it's just, you know, the focus is about engagement and local decision making. So anything we can do to improve that and get it right, we will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to ask, I understand that at the outset we spoke about extra staffing in the section. When will we get to a position where we don't receive communications that start off with an apology for it being so late as a response?
Mark, can I ask you to take that one on?
You're on mute, Mark.
So apologies. Yes, sorry. As I said, Councillor Allen, you know, it's a small team with a massive workload. You know, we don't always get it right. Absolutely not. And then when we get it wrong, we apologise. I think this report will help us to manage our workload and hopefully get it wrong less often, if you like. But as I said, you know, the role of the team and the work of the team is really appreciated. I'm sure you would agree, but we don't get it right all the time. And to be perfectly honest, you know, as I said, there's 950 or so projects on that list. So there's at least 950 individuals across Perth and Kinross who want us to deliver something which we will never be able to deliver. You know, so I think certainly for the foreseeable future, we will be still making some apologies because we can't make expectations, but we do our best, and working with yourselves as part of the ward meetings, I think, has really improved the situation.
Barbara?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. And to add to what Mark said as well, that, you know, sort of the team are, you know, sort of, I consider quite significantly under pressure. Really grateful for the additional resources that have been added to that team, obviously in terms of new-ish members of staff, because the other thing about that team is that they tend to get snapped up and go elsewhere because they're so good as well. So it's about our ability to recruit and retain those members of staff. But equally, we are looking at an improvement event, you know, sort of to try and address what must be a very difficult set of circumstances for the team themselves, trying to answer question after question and add in new schemes as well, so that we are actively looking at that.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren. Claire.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you. In some ways, the question I'm about to ask, Mark has touched on it. there is a priority being given to community council voices, and within my ward, certainly, I have areas where there's no community council representation, and I feel that has a slight disadvantage for these areas. And Mark suggested that there's not one size fits all in a previous answer, but I just wonder if he has any other suggestions as to any other community groups that could be involved in discussions. You know, for example, say a great example last week within the boundary of my ward, there was quite a bad RTC that resulted in a fatality. That area does not have a community council representing it, and it just I am discovering that the community council voice is seen to be a strong consultee, but it doesn't. There's a disparity within some of the areas that we represent because there are no active community councils, and I would be heartened to try and assist to maybe level that voice within the community to dial into these road safety concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just say that, yes, we recognise that community councils don't cover the whole area, and it would be nice if they covered more of the area, and that leaves gaps. But I think that there might be a role for the ward meetings in deciding which other groups, if you like, might have a role. I'm conscious that the community councils have an official standing. Other groups might simply represent partial interests, but I'd ask Mark to add to my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. As you know, you've answered it better than I could, because that's exactly the case. Ultimately, the decision will still sit with the ward members, and it would be great to have a wider community council representation. But where that doesn't exist, as I said, the decision still will lay with the ward members, and the ward members are, you know, are far more informed about their area, the environment, and the local groups. So they, you know, absolutely can consult whoever they feel is appropriate to talk to and listen to, and feed that back into those ward meetings. But that's where the decision will sit. So just by not having a community council, they won't be disadvantaged in any way, because as you've mentioned, the community councils are only being consulted on their view. They are not actually being included in that prioritisation process, because that's for the ward members ultimately to decide on.
Thank you. Councillor Welch, Jack.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for this report. Two questions, one very quick as a clarity, not a clarity, but just a very quick question. If I can just take them one after the other, that'd be okay. So in terms of 4.1, it talks about the term proposer. Just who is that? What is the definition of a proposer? And the second question is, the new Crosstay Link Road, which the council is funding at significant expense, did not include mitigation measures for the communities in the Strathmore ward that may be affected by increased traffic flows through the A93 and the A94. In terms of prioritising road safety improvements for the communities that are going to be impacted by what are identified and maybe even greater rates of traffic movements, is there any sort of view as to modifications of priorities to ensure these communities are supported? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Do you want to address that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'll address the first part of maybe I can hand over to Brian for the second. In terms of proposers, the proposers can be anyone. You know, they can be the community council themselves. They can be elected members. They can be just members of the community, whether that's a community group or individuals. So we often get requests from a whole host of people, and again, that's partly why we are looking to introduce these changes, because sometimes a proposal will just be one individual, one resident who feels that they would like to see a change or a scheme, and that doesn't necessarily have the support of the wider community. So in terms of introducing proposing these changes to get that discussion, have that discussion with ward members will help us. So proposal can effectively be anyone. And in terms of the second part of the question around the Cross-Tay Link Road, I don't know if Brian can provide some background and respond to that.
Thanks, Councillor Welsh, and morning members. Yeah, the Cross-Tay Link Road certainly will bring additional traffic to the A94, and there are a number of considerations that we'll have to take for that road. We've been in discussions with the local communities about what measures potentially we could use, but at this stage there's no dedicated budget allocated to deliver measures along that road. So until to a certain extent, we have been given a small budget of £5,000, which will allow us perhaps to put in some hard standings to allow the speed camera van to sit. But I think what's been requested is larger scale projects, and as it stands just now, we don't have the capital funds to deliver these. And I think it's to be perfectly honest, it's until the road's open and we see what the actual impact of that is. And whether there are issues that we need to address, we won't really be in a position to make that decision.
Barbara?
Thank you, convener, but we are very, very well aware of the issues, and we're working and will continue to work with the elected members in the wards affected by the impact of the CTLR, and we'll come back through the capital process.
Thank you. Replies. I still want to note, my concern as a ward councillor and other ward councillors that the communities on the A93 and the A94 have significant concerns about this. Thank you.
And we're also aware of, the issues of concerns within Ward 1 as well. So we're looking at that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We now come to second questions. Councillor Forbes, I think you've taken away your second question. Thanks. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. Thanks for bringing forward the report and the suggestion on this community engagement step. I know that we'll be doing this before the start of the new financial year, so it was maybe a suggestion that I know we've talked about it in the individual ward meetings, which are, as everybody has said, really useful. But one of the things that is I think we've recognised is missing is the detail around the description of each project. It might be okay for us as elected members and officers having talked about it every 3 months, but it will need to be refined and expanded for members of the community. In terms of that database, though, or the spreadsheet, a couple of years ago there was talk about putting that on the council website so that members of the public could see where the priorities were, and I just wondered where we were with potentially uploading that and making that visible to the public.
Thank you for that. I certainly agree that proposals put to community councils on consultation should be well explained to them so they know what they're after. With regard to the other matter you raised, I don't personally recall that, but Mark, do you have a recollection? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, convener. We absolutely committed to do that, and I think that would be really helpful because we get lots of inquiries all the time, so that will certainly help to manage them. In terms of exactly where we're up to, Darryl, I think we'll be able to advise on where that is up to.
Yeah, the first part of Councillor Stewart's question in relation to the information on the spreadsheet, before we issue it to the community councils, we want to expand on the information that's available within it, so there'll be a more detailed description of the actual site location, but also the project as well. So rather than simply saying warning signs or footway widening, we'll try and put in more descriptive information there. In regards to making the information available on a publicly accessible format. We have been in discussion with IT, and there is a meeting later this week, I think it's tomorrow afternoon, to take that on further, looking at how we provide the information to customers and to the elected members, but also how we allow people to input into it, how they put forward their requests. If they have a road safety concern, that they can register that. But we will hope to have more information before the end of the calendar year, so that we can then share that information with the elected members and the community councils at the start of the next phase of this process.
Thank you. And now we come to the final question, second question from Councillor Waters. Richard.
Thank you, convener. One of the main issues that we've become aware of in Kinross, chatting to local councillors, community councillors about this, is there quite a lot of projects that would be given a zero priority, and they would want moved from the list. In 4.8 you cover it, and you say that there will be the opportunity to remove schemes from the list. Can I just ask what kind of process that would take? How would community council stroke local members look at getting items moved from the list, which might be able to drop it off 950 on the list quite considerably? Thank you.
Mark, can you pick that up?
Yeah, I think Darryl's put answer in the chat. Thanks, Convener. Darryl.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Waters, yeah, we have had discussion at some of the ward meetings about schemes that are no longer considered to be necessary or appropriate, and in agreement with the elected members at those meetings, we have removed them from the list. Some of those schemes have been superseded because other projects have taken place. Some of them are no longer considered necessary because of changes in travel patterns. But I think with all of these issues, it would be through consultation and discussion with the ward councillors.
Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Bailey, Alistair Bailey.
Hello, pardon me. Thank you, Convener. My question's in follow-up to something that was mentioned in the response to, I think it was Councillor Welch's question about the mitigations to the Cross-Tay Link Road traffic, both on the A94 and through the Sidlaw Hills in Ward 1, Castle Gowrie. I was a bit concerned because I think I heard one of the officers in the response say that we might need to wait and see the impact of the road before we make those mitigations. However, I believe that the reason we're required to make those mitigations is actually because of a planning condition that was put on the planning application. So I'm somewhat concerned to hear that we might now do that after the road is built. Ordinarily, as people will know, when there's a planning condition on something, that planning condition has to be met before the infrastructure, the road, the supermarket, the housing is occupied. Could we have some clarity, please, on the council's intention with regard to that planning condition? I've been frantically trying to look at the actual condition just now, but haven't been able to find it, so I could be wrong about the nature of how that's worded. But ordinarily, these things have to be done before the road opens, not after. Thank you.
Mark, can you pick that one up initially?
Yeah, again, I think Brian will be better placed to respond. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Bailey Will. Yes, it was myself that made the comment. It was really just a general comment. I think in a lot of cases, concerns about road safety are raised where it's assumed that there may be a problem. I think what I was trying to convey to you was that in some cases ourselves, we don't know if there will be a problem. If there is a problem, then we're happy to look to address that how best we can. With regards to the planning side of it, I'm not directly involved in that. I don't know about the planning conditions side of it. Certainly, as I said earlier on, there was no capital fund set aside for ourselves to deliver any form of mitigation measure on the A94 in advance of the road opening. But yes, we're happy to go back and speak to our planning colleagues to see what that condition is. And if there is a requirement for us to do that, and undoubtedly we'll aim to do that. But it was just a general comment. It wasn't a let's just wait and see what happens. It was there may be issues pop up that we did not anticipate, and if that's the case, then we'll look to address these accordingly.
Thank you for the clarification. Thanks.
And Barbara would like to come in.
Thank you, convener. And as I said, I mean, I'm well aware of the concerns within those wards that we've mentioned. So we will come back to you in due haste about that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There being no further questions, I will move the report. This report provides members with details of the proposed changes to the Council's road safety project assessment criteria. The changes include the direct input of community councils where they exist, and the introduction of additional criteria that will allow projects that are of similar scoring to be ranked in local priority order. In addition, it is proposed that justified requests for road safety measures from individual members of the community will be considered with the respective ward members at the regular road safety projects list ward meetings. And I believe, and others have said, that those meetings are very useful as part of our way forward. This will form part of the regular road safety projects review process. I'm happy to accept the recommendations in this report and move the paper for approval. And can I ask Councillor Massey to second the report?
Happy to second the report.
Thank you. And we now move to comments, and Councillor Allen, I think you were first on the list. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. Just to point out really that things happen, and sometimes something will come along, and as elected members we make a request. The usual response is that you need to drop one of your other priorities to let this happen. When I ask what those priorities are, so that we as elected members can take a decision, it all goes quiet. We need that information. I'm happy to discuss this when we meet next week. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're all conscious that, you know, the roads issue it's a dynamic issue, and priorities can and do change as required. Well, I accept that. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, convener. I would just like to put on record my thanks to Darrell and his colleagues. I do really appreciate the pressure they're under. I know that there are 940 jobs to be done. I know that's going up by the day. I think as a council we have to accept that we'll never get all of these jobs done, and I think sometime quite soon we're going to have a pretty hard conversation about how we manage that workload, because we don't have the money to throw at it. So I think somewhere down the line we're going to have that discussion and decide what we want to do. I've got a specific concern about the accident criteria, and I understand we need to deal with facts. So accident statistics will undoubtedly be a fact that we have to look at when we make decisions on how to spend. But as a councillor, it's really hard to say to communities, no, you can't have this because there hasn't been any accidents. That, of course, immediately raises the question, well, does someone have to die before we build that speed reduction measure or whatever? So I'm just wondering if at some point we could have a look at if there's another way that we can get the data that we need to get to decide how we spend the limited money that we have. I have some concerns about the timescale. We're going to be going to community councils, I think, once a year with this, and I'm wondering if that will delay any schemes that may be ready to go. I'm hoping that there's something built into the system where we can actually short circuit that. If there's money to be spent, a scheme ready to go, and we just need a decision, I'm sure we can find a way around that. And following up finally on the question by Councillor Welsh, and I think raised again by Bailey, I'm kind of delighted to hear, given what he said, I'm delighted that I got in quite quickly and managed to get some commitment from the council for traffic calming measures through the Carsagowrie ward, and discussions on those are ongoing, and I'm really grateful to the time that Darrell spent with myself and members of the community to try and get this actioned in advance of the road opening. Thanks.
Thank you. We now move to Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, convener. One of the key challenges I'm finding as a councillor is this aspect of communication between communities and the team. And first, I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Forbes has said. You know, in terms of Darrell and Brian, that they're trying to do an excellent job, an important job, and we as ward councillors are absolutely trying to help them. My comment is around this aspect of communication and how we can potentially improve that communication to support the team and make sure that the expectations of the community are met. And it's possibly worthwhile considering maybe a small working group, maybe for members of this committee to sit with the team and look at how we maybe improve that communication process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duff, John.
Thanks, convener. I'd also like to add my thanks to Brian, to Mark, to Darrell, and to Blair. We appreciate that it's a small team and they are under pressure, but obviously I think, as well, all elected members know, road safety is a key issue in our communities, and in that regard, better engagement is always to be welcomed, both by ward members and by the community councils. And if it helps to cut the amount of abortive work and speed up our priority projects, then I'm sure the councillors and the public will be pleased by this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart. Colin.
Thanks, convener. Just to add my thanks to all of the road safety team, expressed previously by other members, for the work that they do. I know that the workload is huge in that department. To pick up on a point that Councillor Welsh made, I'm aware of a situation in our ward prior to me becoming a councillor, where one person, so in terms of the point that you were making about the proposers, Councillor Welch, I'm aware of a situation where a small hamlet, one person had asked for street lighting, and that got progressed as a project, and then nobody had asked everybody else in the hamlet and they didn't want it. So there definitely does need to be some filtering out of projects in terms of, is it a good idea? Does it have community support? And in that context, there is, and I just remind everybody, I'm not sure that it's been used, but there is a consultation and engagement framework which would allow, which if followed, would allow projects to, the impact of projects on communities to be considered, and then the level of engagement in terms of, for example, could we have gone out in that particular situation and knocked on every door in the, all 10 doors in the hamlet, to find out what the actual strength of community feeling was. So that there's a framework there, it exists, it could be used, but we just haven't as a council fully implemented that. On another follow-up to both Councillor Welch and Bailey's questions, in terms of the A93 and A94 mitigation measures that were required when the Crosstail Link Road opens, just a reminder to everybody that the it is not an unbased assumption that there will be more traffic. It's the council's own projections that say that, for example, on the A94 heading south to the Crosstail Link Road, there will be an increase of around 12% in the first year after opening, solely due to the opening of the Crosstail Link Road. So over and above any general increase in traffic, and that most of that traffic will be heavy goods, or a higher proportion than the average of that traffic will be heavy goods vehicles. So the council itself has projected these increases, and we definitely need more mitigations on the A93, the A94, and as I understand, over the SIDLAWs in toward one. So the commitment that Director Renton gave is very welcome. Thank you. Otherwise, I think this is a very welcome paper and happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Smith, Frank.
Thank you very much, convener. My comments are very much what's been echoed here, especially by Councillor Forbes. And I would like to thank Darrell for coming along to the East Strathearn Community Council and explaining things to the people. The problem is, of course, is that what we say we're going to do, and if it's not getting done, especially with the size of workforce, it puts a wee bit of a damning on the council's appearance, to be quite honest. So we have to go back, remember, and explain if these jobs are not done. So I'd like to thank him very much. But on a positive note, I'd like to thank Brian Cagill, by the way, for his help regarding signage on the closure of a road round about the Hunting Tower area. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you very much. And Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. I really just would like to echo the comments of thanks and support to the team dealing with the issue of road safety. Barbara, Mark, Darrell, Brian, Blair, and anybody else I have omitted to mention here. We really do appreciate it and recognise the pressure that you are under. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Waters, Richard.
Thank you, convener. Yes, you know, the whole road safety team have in my impression been very, very good at community engagement leading up to this. It's absolutely great to see this paper coming forward and to formalise that and to get a kind of proper structure into how we're going to communicate with community councils and how that will help benefit the whole programme. And obviously it's concerning. You've got 950 projects on a list, and I think this is a positive way forward to try and deal with that, hopefully through reducing stuff that people don't want. And I know there's quite a few comments of members here with projects in various wards that are just run out of any desire for to have any support locally to have them progressed. So I would just like to thank the officers for bringing this forward and fully welcome and endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Barbara Renton has asked if she can come in with the final comment. Barbara.
Thank you, Convener, and can I thank the elected members for your very kind comments in terms of the road safety team. It's rarely, you know, sort of that I would ask to come in at the end of all of your comments, but I am well aware of the pressure that this team is under, and I'm sure that Brian and Darrell and Mark will feed back all of those comments back to the team. We are aware, though, that if we can get this right, then, you know, sort of and make some improvements, then that will help both the team in terms of their workload, but also some of the comments in terms of being able to feed back to your communities. But if they're getting something like 20, 30, you know, sort of emails a week, then that becomes really, really difficult for them. And my job is to make sure that we can support the team, support you as elected members, and then get that information back to your communities. It may be that those answers are not what your communities want to hear, but I think that we do need to be honest. We cannot do everything, and that the process that we've had since 2019 and this amendment to it is trying to help that. And I would be grateful for all elected members if you could support us in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Can we agree the recommendations as set out in the report? Thank you very much. We now move to item 6, the proposed 30-mile-an-hour speed limits, and I would ask Brian Cargill to introduce this report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, convener, and morning members. This report provides members with details of the objection that was received during the statutory consultation process for the Perth and Kinross Council 30-mile-per-hour variation order. The order seeks to promote a traffic regulation order to introduce a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit in Kinloch. Kinloch had a temporary 20-mile-per-hour speed limit introduced under the Spaces for People project in an effort to reduce traffic speeds and to allow physical distancing when pedestrians were passing each other. However, setting the speed limit unrealistically low in Kinloch has led to poor compliance, and it is not considered appropriate to make the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit permanent. Given the road width, the road alignment, limited frontage development, and to provide a consistency across the area, a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit is considered more appropriate. The objector does not agree with raising the speed limit to 30 mph in Kinloch and would like the 20 mph speed limit retained and traffic calming measures provided to increase compliance with the 20 mph speed limit. The road safety team do not consider it appropriate to do so, and it is proposed to amend the speed limit to 30 mph to provide consistency and to improve compliance with a reduced speed limit. The 30mph speed limit in Kinloch was proposed as part of 13 other locations to receive a 30mph speed limit. The traffic regulation order for the other 12 locations has been made, with Kinloch being deferred so that the objection can be considered at this committee. The proposed 30mph speed limit in Kinloch should lead to better compliance with the speed limit and improve road safety for all road users, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Brian. The first question, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. Just a quick question for Brian. The speed reduction measures that you just mentioned that were requested, is that on the list that we've just been debating in the previous item?
I'll defer to Darrell for that one, but because it's not something that we've agreed, I suspect that the answer will be no, it's not been added to that list.
That is correct, Brian. We've yet to identify which physical measures would be appropriate at that location, so they're not currently on the list.
Thank you. Bailey. Alistair.
Thank you for the report. Just a question seeking a little bit of clarity to check my understanding is correct. So Kinloch, as well as the other locations, I'm assuming they benefited from a temporary 20 mile an hour. So the net move, but prior to that, they were national speed limit, which would be 60 in these cases for cars. So am I right in understanding that really the net move here is from 60 down to 30, even though they took a period of time at 20 because of the spaces for people? So the net movement we're agreeing here is really from 60 to 30, because if we took no action, they would go from 20 straight to 60, if that makes sense.
My understanding, this is restoring the status quo ante before the spaces for people, and these were 30s, but I may be wrong and I'll ask Brian to come in.
Yeah, Darrell can give you the specific detail of that, but you're very accurate in your description there, Bailey. Darrell, do you want to confirm if it was a 60 to a 30?
It was a 40, and so we put in a temporary 20 miles per hour speed limit, and we are now proposing a 30. But in the 30 limit, the lower speed limit is being extended to include a housing development on Palace Road, just to the south of Kinross.
Okay, so it's still net a reduction. Thank you. Yes. I'm reassured. Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, and I stand corrected. Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to ask a question on Appendix 1, but I appreciate these have possibly been passed, so if you don't think it's appropriate, I'll withdraw the question. But it was just really a question for clarification for Darrell, really, if I may. But as I say, you may have discussed this at the previous meeting, and I'm not a regular member, so if you feel it's inappropriate, I'll withdraw it and won't ask.
No, please go ahead and we'll see.
Okay. It's a question. I'm being specific now to Kirkmichael and Ballon too. Now, my understanding from Darrell in the past has been that the 20 mile per hour limits that we have currently are based upon local consultation with elected members, was that they should all stay in place, and that the current 40 mile an hour limits which feed in were to be removed and replaced by countdown markers. But I'm looking at the maps that we have in front of us, and we seem to be going from the national speed limit of 60, then down to 30, and then back into 20 again. I mean, that seems to be different to what we were originally, I think, was to be agreed, that the 20 limits were to stay as they were. So I'm a bit confused there at the moment. If Darrell could clarify, because as I say, I thought they were just going to be the 40s were going, countdown markers into 20 mile an hour limits staying as they are. I noticed there's no mention of Bridge of Cali at all in this, but if you can just clarify that for me.
You've managed to confuse me as well, Councillor Braun. I'm trying to get my head around that question. The communities that you refer to in Ward 3 are remaining at 20 miles per hour. So the 20 mile per hour speed limits that we introduced in Bridge of Cali, Ballintoom, Kirkmichael are remaining at 20. We are removing the 40 mile per hour buffer on the approaches to the village and replacing that with countdown signs. That the works order has been issued to Tayside Contracts. They're currently on site at other locations installing the signs at the moment. This site is slightly different with a number of hamlets where, due to the lack of frontage development and the lack of urbanisation of the area, that the 20 was inappropriate and too low, and we found that compliance was poor. It's been considered more appropriate at Kinloch and at several other communities to increase the speed limit to 30 to get better compliance. We would need physical traffic calming measures to bring the speeds down lower, but we can also assess those communities in the future. If there's further development or if travel patterns change, they can be reviewed and a 20 could be considered. But up in the Lanes area, no, they will be 20-mile-per-hour speed limits.
If I could just follow on with another question, because on the maps that we've got in front of us, they seem to be showing 30-mile-an-hour limits going in, or am I misreading them completely? I'm going to try and pull one up in front of me now. Page 37 of the report shows Ballantoom, and it seems to show now a 30-mile limit, proposed 30-mile-per-hour limit. Yeah.
That was on the south of the village where the caravan park had been. So in the core of the village, the 20 is remaining.
Right. So we're now taking away the 40s and putting in a 30. Is that?
That's one site where, because of the poor alignment of the road and because of the holiday park there and the larger vehicles turning in and out, at the south of Ballantoom, that the 40 was been replaced with a 30. Okay. But at the north of the village, then it's 20 international speed limit, and that'll be indicated by the countdown signs.
I'm with it. So will there be countdown signs on this side, the caravan park side as well?
Generally not. No, we don't normally put in countdown signs going from national speed limit into a 30 miles per hour speed limit, unless it is on a high speed A-class road. The speeds on that section of the A924 are relatively low, and there should be no difficulty for drivers if the signs are positioned correctly, understanding where the lower speed limit starts and adjusting their speed accordingly. But that can be reviewed, and if necessary, countdown signs can be put in approaching that 30, but it's not in the current proposal.
And I assume that's the same reason at Kirkmichael as well. Because
yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that, and thank you, convener, for your indulgence on that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braun. I don't think it's quite the skiing season in your neck of the woods yet, but you were taking us slightly off piste.
It's the swimming season up here at the moment, to be honest.
Thank you, Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. I found this very interesting, going where, as elected members, we're all trying to go. When we get to 2025, is there not a proposal to move all these village roads to 20 miles an hour, as has just happened in Wales? Or am I completely missing it?
I'm not sure of any general move in that direction in Scotland, and I would certainly want to learn from the experience in Wales before we did anything like that, but others in other places may have different views. Thank you. Can I come to Brian? Others, do you have any other information on this?
Yes, I think Darrell's best placed to give you an update on that, because he's part of the committee that's dealing with the survey with Transport Scotland. So Darrell, can you give us the latest position statement with that?
Yeah, Transport Scotland are proposing a national 20-mile-per-hour strategy that would see the introduction of 20 mile per hour as the default speed limit on all unrestricted roads in urban areas. So that's basically all the residential streets that are currently C and U class roads. Their proposal does not include A or B class roads, which are classified as restricted roads. Perth and Kinross Council, along with a number of other local authorities, have asked Transport Scotland for clarification on this, because we know that there are a lot of our rural communities where the village straddles an A-class road, and we are seeking guidance from them and information as to what additional resources, both in terms of staff and funding, would be provided if the councils wished to introduce 20 as the default speed limit throughout the entire village. So, for Councillor Allen's, from his perspective, villages like Braco and Muthol, which sits astride the A822, all the side streets under the national strategy would automatically become 20. But the main road would not be included unless Perth and Kinross Council, as the local roads authority, wished to introduce that. So we're waiting for further guidance from Transport Scotland.
Okay, thank you. I see no further questions on this report, therefore I will move it. This report provides members with details of the objection that was received during the statutory consultation process for the Perth Kinross Council 30-mile-an-hour variation order. The order seeks to promote a traffic regulation order to introduce a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit in Kinloch. The proposed 30-mile-an-hour speed limit in Kinloch should lead to better compliance with the speed limit and improved road safety for all users. It is recommended that committee members set aside the objection and that the order is made as advertised. I am happy to accept the recommendation in this report and move the paper for approval. And can I ask Councillor Massey to second the report? Thank you.
Happy to second the report.
Thank you. And there is a comment, Councillor Braun. Bob.
Thanks, Convener. It's just really to add that this was a case where all three elected members agreed that this limit should be increased to 30. That 20 was too difficult to sustain. There was a condition based on residents' request that 30 be extended into Palace Road, the full length of Palace Road, which has been done. And thank you very much to Darrell and the team for doing that. But as I say, it was supported by all members. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I see no further requests for comment. Let's check. No further requests for comment. Can we therefore agree the recommendations set out in the report? Thank you. We now move to item 7, developer contributions and affordable housing supplementary guidance updates. And can I ask Lucy Sumner to introduce this report? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, committee. Thank you for hearing this report on the proposed developer contributions and affordable housing supplementary guidance. Members will note from the contents of this report that draft guidance was presented to this committee at its meeting on the 31st of May 2023. In May, members agreed to initiate a period of public consultation on the draft guidance document and for a report to be made back to this committee. Officers have now carried out that public consultation and this report presents the findings. The report asks members to note the changes made to the guidance following that consultation and seeks committee's authority to submit the guidance to Scottish ministers. Responses to the public consultation are set out in section 5.7 and appendix 3 of this report, and subsequent amendments to the guidance that have been carried out are summarised in section 5.8 and shown in appendices 1 and 2 of the report. In approving the recommendations of this report, the next steps of this review process, set out in section 5.9 of the report, shall be initiated. Thank you, and we will be glad to help with any questions on this report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes. Councillor Robertson, question on section 5.7.
Thank you, Convener. This is a very important report, I think, and I would like to ask about 5.7. Based on the discussions we've had today about the importance of transport infrastructure with new developments, I noticed, especially locally, that there's a huge change in the volumes of traffic with all the new housing we've had in Kinross. So I think I want to know how much emphasis we take on trying to make sure that local roads can cope and that the infrastructure is in place with regard to crossing places and things with all developments within Perth and Kinross.
Lucy?
I'll just go back to this one. No, it works. Thank you for that question. Yes, so with regards to the transport infrastructure section of the supplementary guidance, that developer contribution is specific to Perth Transport Futures projects and costs gathered from developers towards those projects. Site-specific developer contributions in a broad sense are considered through the planning process and through consultee responses. So whether mitigation from the specific development can be designed into the development first, or whether a financial contribution can be made to the council to include mitigation for the impact of that development. That can still happen in addition to the supplementary guidance. So the supplementary guidance is specific to developer contributions for Perth Transport Futures Phase 1 and 2. But as I say, anything site specific is usually considered through the planning process, through development management process.
Convener, can I come back on that? I think that's very helpful, Lucy. Thank you for that. But the problem is that with a large housing development, the effect it can have can be, in traffic terms, can be found miles from the actual development, and especially in rural areas like Kinross. So if we could maybe put a marker down that we should try always in future to look at the total landscape of roads round about a development and see and try and estimate what impact it will have on people's safety and other issues when we're considering a major housing development.
Yes, absolutely. And I would trust the input from, as I say, the relevant consultees during the planning process to consider supporting information with planning applications such as transport statements and transport assessments that would provide recommendations for mitigation that would be suitable for that development. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Lucy, for the report. My question's on section, the appendix 2.1 on page 64 of our pack, legal and policy background. And it's really on the section 75. As you're aware that section 75 is a useful reference, but I've noticed that on the PKC website under supplementary guidance, developer contributions and affordable housing, it states that work to develop a database detailing all section 75 obligations which the council has concluded is ongoing. Now, if you click onto that link, it says that the register has not been updated since May 2014. I would like to know if there's an undertaking. I know that it's a huge task and it's an undertaking, it'll be huge, but can I ask, is there any plans to update that register?
Ben Wilson.
Yes, thank you for that question. So, yeah, in short, yes, there is. Clearly, there's quite a lot of time elapsed since that last update. A couple of remarks. One, all signed Section 75s are publicly available on the same place that the planning application papers to which they relate are, which is the planning applications portal. So the information has been available in the public domain since then, albeit not in one place. And also, as you'll see on that same web page, monitoring of contributions has been carried out across the different types of contributions in the subsequent years. More generally, and it's a bit difficult for me to comment on how things were done prior to last year when I joined the council, but as you say, it's a large undertaking, and we've had ongoing Section 75 negotiations to be signed, and this is one of those things where priority is given to making sure that any new Section 75 we sign is robust and achieves the council's objectives and manages future risk over, in some cases, decades, not years. And also that priority has been given to monitoring that we get in the contributions from these. So I would assure the committee that those tasks have been done. But just in response to the initial question, yes, we're pivoting our attention to that at the moment. I don't want to give a timescale for when we'll be able to update that register, because, as I say, there's other priorities and more more financial implications for the council. But we haven't forgotten about that. We do intend to get around to that as soon as practical.
Thank you for that. I'm pleased to hear that the register has been updated. It's the old, but the trouble is it's the older ones that, as the convener of planning and placemaking, I'm trying to find. And I know that you say that you can look up, it's in within the planning application, but having a place where you can look up section 75s would be extremely beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you. Now move to Councillor Duff, John.
Thanks, Convener. My question's on page 95 and at paragraph 5.3.5, which talks about independent living. And in that paragraph there, reference to certain medical conditions has been removed. I was just wondering the reason for that and if it was perhaps to allow for a wider range of additional support needs. But thank you.
Thank you. Lucy?
Yes, you've noted that correctly in terms of the draft that was originally brought to committee and subsequently for public consultation. That has been removed simply to consider these conditions on a kind of case-by-case basis. We don't want to include specific things to rule any one thing out for the sake of a list that has been defined in the guidance. It's simply just so that it can be considered on a more broad basis than those ones that were originally mentioned.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey. Ken.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks, Lucy, for this report. By the way, it's very in depth. I just want a wee bit more background in section 583, basically reinstated guidance, etc. Could you just give us a bit more detail on that, if possible? Thanks.
Can I just confirm that that's 5.8.3 of the committee report? And yes, yep, that's okay. Yes, so there was a caption from the existing adopted guidance relating to the table referred to at paragraph 3.9.3 of the guidance that had come out in the drafting of that draft document, and it's been reinstated to just clarify that revised commute sums will be published on the Perth and Kinross Council website, and a link will be added into the document to that relevant web page.
Thank you. Councillor Braun. Bob.
Thanks, Convener. Question regarding commuter sums again. It causes a lot of debate locally when developers are developing sites and they get away with some commuter sums. So I'm just wondering, should we consider putting in a form of minimum for a developer? So if you have a site, say, with 10 houses being built, it's more likely perhaps a commuter sum will be a way forward. But if a developer's doing 20 houses or more, should we be putting in something along the lines that the expectation would be that they will build the 5 affordable houses on site, and that any commuter sums or credits will be unlikely to be approved? A bit more specific to get builders to actually build these houses on site.
Ben Wilson.
So the general direction of change with some of the edits we've made in this is to get more on-site provision, including on small sites where perhaps previously there's been an assumption that commute sums will always be accepted. So the changes under section 3.8 of the affordable housing appendix, the affordable housing section of the guidance, are intended to achieve that. And the sort of sequential instances are set out, are there to take account of site-specific circumstances. So we've avoided sort of establishing a new numerical limit where it will just be assumed that we'll take commuted sums. If you could tell me a bit more about the type of sort of change you've got in mind, is it that that developers would be automatically allowed to do commuted sums in certain sizes?
No, my thoughts along the lines was that if a development has a minimum number of houses, let's say 20 as an example, I'm not sure that's saying that's the one, but if a developer's building 20 or more, then that will give them a guideline to know they will have to build the affordable housing on site, and that there will be no real chance of commuter sums or credit given to build somewhere else. I would like, it seems that sometimes they get away with a commuter sum, or seem to get away with it in the past, And I think if they knew there was a minimum, that's it. Anything above that, you will have to build the affordable housing on site. That was my thoughts.
So, I mean, well, I direct you previously to a later section of the affordable housing guidance. Section 3, the sequential approach, runs through that, and it says essentially, if there's 5 or more units, we're seeking affordable housing, and then there's an exception for sites in Perth City Centre where they tend to be sort of gap sites and flats. That's to do with build practicalities. But beyond that, our starting point for the discussion is on-site provision. And then it comes down to the circumstances, whether commute sums are appropriate. What you'll see coming through in terms of sites that are getting built out for market housing will be a reflection of planning permissions issued over the last 2, 3, 4 years. So it will take a little time for this shift in direction to play out and for you to start to see on-site provision on these sites between 5 and, sort of between 5 and 20 units. But that's one of the main changes in this guidance review has been to emphasise on-site provision. There will still be circumstances where it is appropriate to take commute sums, but those will be fewer now as a result of finalising and adopting this guidance.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. And now Councillor Stewart. Colin.
Thanks. I was going to ask something different, but my interest has been piqued by Councillor Braun's question and Mr. Wilson's response. I'm looking at 3.8, 3.83 in the affordable housing guidance. The instances where a commuted sum may be acceptable include a development in a rural setting or out with a settlement where it is difficult to access services, where the scale of development results in sporadic units, creating affordability difficulties for housing associations. So my first question, or the first part of my question relating to this is, one of the difficulties in remote rural settings is actually getting affordable housing because so many of the places are taken up. I know that my colleague, the Provost, would particularly agree about, and presumably Councillor Duff as well, would particularly agree about Highland Perthshire. It is about getting affordable housing in those remote rural areas with so much housing being taken up by tourism accommodation, etc. And then on the next bullet point about sporadic units creating affordability difficulties for housing associations, I've heard that talked about a number of times, but I've never heard a housing association say it, and I wonder whether it's just an assumption that is made and has become kind of mythical in its in its propagation, rather than something that housing associations actually have an issue with. And I wonder whether, specifically on those 2 points, why would we exclude remote rural, and do housing associations genuinely have a problem with sporadic or with disjointed affordable housing in developments?
Ben, thank you.
I'll take the last part first. Yes, housing associations will do. They manage their stock, their estates. They look to grow it. They've got growth plans, as do we. But they are looking. They've got to consider how the maintenance teams move around their areas. Most of these housing associations cover several local authority areas. They've not drawn lines on map and saying we will not talk about something here or there. It will depend on the circumstances, but it is a factor. And so when it comes to a specific site coming forward and consideration of how could it be on-site provision and how could that be done and what form of affordable housing it will be, then for the housing associations and indeed for the council as housing authority, that is a factor. In terms of remote rural locations, it comes down to just what kind of services are in the settlement. There's a risk of providing housing at affordable prices in a settlement which has no local services. We may address housing poverty, but we may inadvertently create transport poverty in terms of people having to rely upon travelling by car to reach a shop where they can buy a pint of milk. But again, we've not drawn lines on map and said or here's a no-go zone for new build affordable housing. The way we see us achieving a shift in the development sector for quite small rural sites and getting on-site provision of affordable housing will be to continue to look at social rent and mid-market rent through ourselves or with partners. But there's other forms of affordable tenure like self-build, and which can be delivered meeting our affordable definitions in terms of restrictions on the title of the property to avoid it's been sold on, and also community-led development, which under the new local housing strategy we've got an aim there to increase the number of community-led developments, and those can take a shape and form where access for maintenance isn't such an issue, because if that's been arranged through a locally based community development trust that can handle that. So this will require different forms of what the affordable housing is to fit it onto these small sites. And of course, the numbers will be quite small as well. It might be 3 units if it's in a 12-unit development. It's those practical issues that have been the argument for not providing it in the past. They still remain relevant, which is why they're still in the guidance. This is old text from the guidance, but the further up the document, this establishment of sequential approach gives us a basis for pushing for on-site provision where we wouldn't be able to get it previously.
Thanks. Just a quick supplementary then. On the issue about the housing associations, have they put something in writing to us? Because I'm not seeing them in the list of people who've commented as consultees.
Thank you. Goodness me. No, none of them did, but we have a quarterly meeting with the Strategic Housing Providers Forum, which is with the Housing Association's senior staff. We made them aware of this. I think that no response is a sign of sort of comfortableness with the shift in direction for the guidance. In terms of the point you're raising, that's the kind of thing which we did discuss with them in relation to the matter of integration of affordable housing within developments, and the question of what fine grain that happens, and that was discussed at the Affordable Housing Member Officers Working Group as well. From the Housing Association's perspective, from the operational perspective, it's the same issue. We're thinking about in perpetuity, where are your maintenance and support services going to be distributed to provide high quality services for tenants and the joint owners where it's shared equity. And so these factors remain relevant to that, and it's appropriate that it's in the guidance, but it doesn't undermine the shift in direction here to get on-site provision, even in small sites and in smaller rural locations.
Thank you. And Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the report. I'm hoping my question is competent. It's trying to follow on from Councillor Robertson. Within the developer contributions, we try to make provision for sports, schools, junction safety, etc. Is there any consideration to the impact that building 600 houses in Auchterarder would have on parking in the town centre? Thank you.
Lucy?
The Auchterarder expansion development framework sites, which I think you're referring to, that has its own Section 75 legal agreement, or in this case, there's 3 or possibly more in terms of planning obligations for those sites. And as I mentioned near the start of the questions, each planning application is considered through the development management process, and what types of mitigation would be appropriate and proportionate for developers to deliver, or for the council to deliver with a contribution from the developers. Not able to comment specifically on the Auchterarder, but I think we're familiar that those planning consents have been in place for a number of years now, and I wouldn't be able to comment on mitigation that was or wasn't included at the time, but it was probably considered that it wasn't appropriate mitigation to include as part of that development at that time.
Barbara would like to come in just now. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Allen, you'll be aware of the Off to Ardor Community Facilities Fund that was part of the agreement because of the expansion from there. And you would also hopefully be aware of the investment that the council is putting into increasing car park in Off to Ardor as well. But it was the Communities Facilities Fund was there to look at the impact for the local community because of the expansion of Off to Ardor.
John's coming in.
Yeah, just very briefly. When we go to LDP4, it'd be nice just if we could recognise that when we build so many houses in a community, it's going to have an impact further than schools and sports facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. And we now come to second questions, and Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Back again on this question about commuter sums. We've had situations in planning where a developer has had planning approval. For whatever reason, a commuter sum has been agreed. The planning approval has lapsed. They've come back several years later with pretty much the same design. It's a formality to go through again. But the commuter sum that's been agreed is the same as what it was, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. Should there be something written in to allow that commuter sum to be updated to the current figures? This may be a legal problem, of course. It may not be something we can do at this stage, but it seems to me that's a situation we've come across a couple of times, and the commuter sum is well out of date per unit, which we'd approved today.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes. So if it's a wholly fresh planning application, then any legal agreement associated with a previous lapsed planning application isn't valid in itself. A fresh permission needs its own legal agreement attached to it before the permission can be issued. So there is an opportunity there, if the previous permission has lapsed altogether, there is an opportunity there to assess the proposal against the policy of the day, including the supplementary guidance, and issue an appropriate legal agreement in that context. So if commuter sum figures have changed in the meantime, that can be factored in, and indeed whether it's use of commuter sums or whether it's on-site provision is it's a valid issue to reconsider in the new policy context.
Thank you.
Thank you. And question from Councillor Duff, and then I'll come to Councillor Stewart for his second one.
I think this is my second question. It's a very quick one. I just wanted to check with Ben that in terms of all the figures in the tables in the report, none of them are showing in red. So I presume these are all the existing figures. They haven't been updated. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that. So the commuted sums, if it's affordable housing, or the developer contributions, which is Appendix 1, those are red because they haven't changed since the public consultation has concluded. So those are the sums that were consulted on through the summer, but they have been increased from the current adopted guidance, which we have in place and published online. I hope that clarifies.
These are previously agreed increases. We're not agreeing them today. Is that what you mean?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. And Councillor Stewart, Colin.
Thanks, Convener. So it's in relation to section 6 of the developer contributions on transport infrastructure. I'm sure it'll be written here, but I'm not quite sure I can sort of tease it out. Are the transport infrastructure contributions retrospective, i.e. For future housing development in certain areas, will there still be a developer contribution towards the cost of the Crossdale Link Road, for example, given that we have put the investment in up front rather than waiting till the end of all of the house building to put the CTLR in?
Yes, so for any new applications that have come in since this contributions policy was implemented sometime in 2014, those applications will be assessed, and if they are eligible, if they fall within the boundary, and if it's the relevant development type, then they will contribute towards those projects. So we've been collecting these contributions since about 2014 towards Perth Transport future costs, and we'll continue to do so.
But I mean, once the Crosstail Link Road opens, can we still gain developer contributions for new applications that come forward?
Yes, sorry for misunderstanding the original question. So section, I'm trying to just flick through the guidance. It's 6.3 of the guidance. Transport modelling that's been carried out to support the local development plan has found that traffic growth within the area within Appendix 2 has calculated that developer contributions will kind of claw back 50% of the project costs. So we'll continue to collect that until those sums have been collected in full.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you. And a final question from Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Convener. My question is on page 69 and it's point 319. And I'll not read it all. It says about the ring fencing of contributions. And it goes on to say that money that is not invested, the developer can ask for it back. I'm hoping the answer is no to this, but has there ever been an instance where we've had to give developers money back?
For lapsed sums, for contributions that have reached the end of the utilisation period, it's very rare at the moment because, as I mentioned, for example, we've been collecting contributions for transport infrastructure since 2014, so we're kind of still working our way through the utilisation in a lot of cases, but it is rare, and I don't have the information to hand, but it's quite rare because in a lot of circumstances they are utilised, they are drawn down to the relevant project. There likely have been some, but I'm not able to confirm how much.
Barbara?
I don't know the exact answer to that, but Councillor Stewart and I would sort of passing wry smiles because this had been subject of a scrutiny review, Colin, was it, or some time ago in relation to that, and the intention is where we can find people and developers, then we would hand that back.
Thank you. And the final question from Councillor Forbes. Angus.
Thank you, Convener. I hope you'll allow me a very quick but very parochial question on the report. And the answer may not be in the room, but I'll try. So the housing development in West Kinross will have generated some kind of transport contribution. Is it fair to say that none of that money can be spent in West Kinross, but instead it will go to the Crosstail Link Road and the Creef Road junction improvements?
I'm not able to confirm, but if it's transport infrastructure contributions that have been requested from a development, it will go towards those projects identified in the guidance, so Perth Transport Futures. If there's site-specific mitigation that has been sought from, as I mentioned earlier, through development management, through the consultees, then those would go towards those specific measures. But in terms of the supplementary guidance, transport infrastructure is quite specific to those projects, but there may also be site specific if that helps.
Thank you very much. There being no further questions, I will now move the report. Members agreed at the last meeting of this committee on the 31st of May to initiate a period of public consultation on proposed updates to the developer contributions and affordable housing supplementary guidance. This report presents members with the outcome of the public consultation carried out on the draft guidance and clarifies any changes to that draft guidance as a result of consultation responses. The proposed supplementary guidance relates to the policy framework of our adopted LDP2 and opportunities to consider policy evolution for developer contributions and affordable housing will be considered as part of the Council's development plan review for LDP3. In moving this report, officers will proceed to submit the guidance document presented to members today to Scottish ministers as the next step in the process to adoption as statutory supplementary guidance. I am happy to accept the recommendations in this report and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Massey to second the report?
Happy to second the report.
Thank you. Are there any comments with regard to this report? Last chance. I see none. Can we therefore agree the recommendations set out in this report? Agreed. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of today's business, and I thank everybody for their attendance. Thank you.